Okay, I think maybe we could begin. All right. I think we can begin now. So first of all, good morning and a good afternoon or good evening, perhaps, depending on where you are in the world. A very warm welcome to you to the UNESCO Historic Urban Landscape Recommendation 10th Anniversary celebrations. This is the first of the preparatory technical sessions. We have 3 sessions today, 3 sessions on the 21st. And we invite you to join all of these technical sessions. The outcomes of these technical sessions will be synthesized and presented on the 24th of June. We have an event on the 24th. You have it on your schedule, and we invite you to please join us on the 24th when we will have the presentation of these technical sessions, and then also a roundtable discussion, actually 2 roundtables of different experts who will come together to discuss these outcomes. On the 23rd, we have a launch of the call for action, the Historic Urban Landscape Call for Action. And we invite you to join us on the 23rd. We will have several mayors from several cities joining us as a high-level session. So thank you very much for your interest and for joining us here today. I'm just going to do a very short introduction to the Historic Urban Landscape Recommendation. You're all already, of course, familiar with many aspects of it, and many of you have been implementing it. But nevertheless, I will just share very briefly. My presentation would be yes. Thank you very much. So the next piece. The Historic Urban Landscape Recommendation was adopted by the General Conference of UNESCO on the 36th session in November of 2011. The recommendation on the Historic Urban Landscape, or the HUL recommendation as we call it, calls on member states to integrate conservation and management of cultural heritage in cities and settlements with policies and practices for sustainable urban development. It is a soft law to be implemented by member states on a voluntary basis. An additional tool to integrate policies and practices of conservation of the built environment into the wider goals of urban development with respect to the inherited values and traditions of different cultural contexts. It applies to all historic cities, not only to World Heritage sites. It advocates a landscape approach for identifying, conserving, and managing historic areas within their broader context, considering the interrelationships between the physical forms, natural features, and social and cultural values. Heritage in this approach is recognized as an intricate part of its larger setting. The geographical, historical, social, and cultural context. Next, please. The Historic Urban Landscape approach emphasizes an approach that views the historic center or the ensemble as an intricate part of its larger setting, the historical, the geographical, social, cultural context. It advocates looking at historic areas as composed of layers of history, economic, social, and spatial relationships between the built heritage, natural environment, and the local communities. These layers include the natural, cultural, tangible, and intangible, universal and local heritage, values that are present in any city. These heritage values should be taken as a point of departure in the overall management and development of the city. Contrary to a preservationist view that rejects any or all changes in the urban areas, This innovative standard setting instrument argues for the integration of heritage conservation with urban development plans and processes in order to manage change to protect the heritage values. The outstanding universal value, the OUV in the case of World Heritage Properties. The approach to managing historic urban landscape is holistic by integrating the goals of urban heritage conservation and those of social and economic development. This method sees urban heritage as a social, cultural, and economic resource for sustainable development of cities, big and small. Next, please. From the perspective of the historic urban landscape recommendation, conservation as a strategy to achieve livability and sustainability, countering a range of urban problems from standardized and monotonous building and the growing lack of public space to debilitating poverty and the increasing risk of climate-related disasters. As a forward-looking instrument, it embraces the idea that cities and settlements can harness the power of cultural heritage to make them vibrant, economically and socially inclusive, and environmentally sustainable. The recommendation highlights the need for new tools and processes to support this innovative approach through civic engagement, knowledge and planning, regulatory systems, and financing mechanisms. The HUL recommendation and its approach has become the standard framework for the implementation of the World Heritage Cities Program. The World Heritage Cities Program has more than 313 World Heritage properties on the World Heritage list that are living urban centers or parts of settlements. The 40th General Conference of UNESCO also reaffirmed the importance of the Historic Urban Landscape Recommendation in the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the New Urban Agenda, and the African Union Agenda 2063, and of course is intimately connected to the World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy. Next, please. From poorly planned tourism development projects and transportation projects to inadequate management plans and systems, many of these are threats, and they pose threats to the outstanding universal value of World Heritage properties. Nearly 50% of SOC reports examined in the World Heritage Committee in the last couple of years, committee meetings, have been in urban areas dealing with urban pressures. More than a third of the World Heritage cities are coastal. These factors are significant both for the protection of heritage and for sustainable development. And you see here Grand Bassin and Split. Next, please. With rising temperatures and accompanying sea level rise, increasing risks of climate change-related disasters are also on the rise. Over 90% of all urban areas are coastal, putting most cities on Earth at risk of flooding from rising sea levels and powerful storms. Historic cities are particularly at risk because of many of them have developed for historical reasons along the coast or along major rivers. There's a large number of World Heritage cities, nearly a third of them are along the coast. Climate change is now among the top threats to cultural and natural heritage sites inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List. Their continued preservation requires understanding their impacts to the outstanding universal value and responding to them effectively. During the last World Heritage Committee meeting, a number of state of conservation reports on World Heritage cities indicated threats related to climate change. And here you see the city of Venice and Byblos. Next, please. The International Experts Meeting, Heritage in Urban Contexts, that took place in January of 2020 in Fukuoka in Japan, to further discuss the worrying patterns of situations affecting heritage sites in urban contexts, as requested by the World Heritage Committee in its recent sessions. As the main output, the Fukuoka outcomes has a methodology to better identify urban attributes and a basic framework for urban heritage management that was developed refining the previously used 6-step approach for implementing the HUL recommendation. And you see these 8 steps of the methodology, which is not really linear in terms of steps, but 8 aspects that cover this methodology, which includes the governance structure, the sustainable development priorities, establishing sustainable development priorities, mapping and inventorying, assessing vulnerabilities, integration and coherence with policies across, looking at a number of different policies in a number of different areas, looking at it intersectorally, essentially, identifying priority actions and projects, establishing partnerships, and reinforcing capacities. Next, please. And I won't go into this in much detail, but this is this indicators that UNESCO developed in over the last 3 years to measure and is now piloting. The idea of these indicators is that they measure the role and contribution of culture to the 2030 agenda at the national and urban level. And you can find more details at this link. Next, please. I just want to end by sharing with you some of the activities of the World Heritage Cities program and related to the HUL recommendation. The first is the World Heritage Cities Dialogue that has been set up as a virtual platform for site managers and local authorities to meet, exchange, and share across their region. The second is the World Heritage City Lab, that is an innovative and collaborative co-creative workshop for developing collaboratively solutions and strategies for challenging World Heritage Cities issues and problems. And the Urban Notebooks, which I hope you're all subscribed for, is the monthly e-newsletter for site managers and includes examples of innovative practices, and it's published in English, French, and Spanish. And we've developed a lot more in relation also with the COVID-19, ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and the recovery and rebuilding of cities in response. And finally, Canopy, a platform of innovative practices and strategies that further heritage protection for sustainable development, including the implementation of the whole recommendation. And with that, I want to thank you very much. And I think that's my last slide. Next, please. Yes, I want to thank you very much. And I want to hand over now to our very, very esteemed Elizabeth Vines, who's a conservation architect and past president of ICOMOS of Australia. We are very delighted to have you. Elizabeth also represents ICOMOS frequently on the HUL recommendation for various international meetings with UNESCO. A warm welcome to you, Elizabeth, and I hand over to you. And I also want to thank very much and introduce Shikha Jain, who is the head of DRONA and a leading architect and conservation specialist from India. Shikha is going to be our rapporteur. Thank you very much, Shikha.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, good evening here in Australia, good morning in Paris and everywhere else in between. It's a great pleasure, and thank you for including me and inviting me as the session chair. And we've got a very interesting session, the next hour and a half. You have your program. We will be looking at 2 case studies, the Royal Exhibition Building in Melbourne, Australia, of course, well known to me, and also Pingyao in China, also well known to me. So it's a great thrill to be included on this. I would like to encourage participants, please, to listen keenly to these case studies and think about the discussion at the end of this session. In my next slide, I do show that my experiences, we are in this session talking about the Asia and Pacific region. the Hull recommendation was early adopted in Ballarat. This is not a World Heritage City, but it's very important historically, as you can see here in these photographs of very substantial architecture. And Ballarat, next slide please, in its adoption of the historic urban landscape approach, created very interesting frameworks at looking and consulting with the community. You can find their approach on their website. You can see here just an excerpt from that website. Susan Fayed is the coordinator of this approach. And the next slide, please, shows how the consultation early on looked at creative ways of assessing the values of this city prior to moving forward to formulating strategies, policies, and then into implementation, which is now well underway because this city has now been applying Hull for nearly 10 years. So it's an early adopter. Next slide, please. In Australia also, the Hull framework is being currently adopted in the World Heritage Bid for the Goldfields of Central Victoria. It's a very flexible approach, as we've heard from Jyoti. And in the case of the Goldfields, of course, this approach will be quite different from Ballarat, which will form part of this bid, but it includes a number of different towns. We also see in the region, the next slide, please, the Hull being referenced in Penang, in Malaysia, in their special area plan, which is now up for review. Georgetown was inscribed in 2008 together with Malacca. And certainly their special area plan references Hull as a framework and as approach. Next one, please. So as Jyoti mentioned, there are 313 World Heritage properties which are part of the World Heritage Cities program. And in the region which we're dealing with, there are 46 in Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. Now, between January 2017 and 2021, there were State of Conservation reports submitted to the World Heritage Committees, and there were many common threats mentioned in these reports, varying significantly from region to region, indicating various challenges in each region. And of course, you can see here in this slide here, a very typical threat, which is the low-scale townscapes of important cities with the ever-challenging framework of managing the impact of new development. Next one, please. Next slide, thank you. We also see as a challenge the responsiveness to the urgency of the SDGs, which as a practicing architect, I take this very seriously. After all, we only have 9 more years to reach 2030, which is where we've set our goals to. And the question is, are we being truly accountable in the way that we are managing our cities? Are we being truly accountable to the next generation? And here you see a photograph of a recurring demonstration in my city in Adelaide on Fridays, where students don't go to school, but they in fact strike in front of the Parliament buildings to basically give a wake-up call to the older generation that these are the people inhabiting and inheriting the earth into the future, and questioning whether we are being responsive to these SDGs. Next one, please. There are other key threats. The one for me also as an architect is this issue about fit of new development, whether it's buildings, as we see here on the right, or public transport, infrastructure, bridges, and so forth, impacting and challenging us on the left. Next slide, please. And the ever challenging issue of the standard of conservation. are appropriate materials and techniques being used? And this is a very interesting model conservation project, which was run about 3 years ago in Yangon, where the emphasis here was on showcasing and modelling the best practice in timber conservation for the windows, lime plaster conservation for the walls, and roofing replacement with traditional materials, serving as an example, a best conservation practice example. Next slide, please. And so continuing with challenges and opportunities, of course, the last 15 to 18 months have been truly challenging for us all. And the question in our cities and towns is, are we learning lessons from our periods from COVID? Are the changing demands of our infrastructure systems being reassessed? For example, can we take our pressure off city streets, as happened during COVID, where very quickly cities responded to a new mode of transport, that was bike lanes, when people fled public transport due to health issues. And so we saw in Budapest 12 miles of new bike lanes, inscribed on the roadway, and in Berlin 14 miles of new bike lanes, which almost appeared overnight. Next slide, please. So please be active during our discussion time after our 2 case studies. I'd like you to be thinking about how these case studies and experiences will and can inform the next steps in the implementation of the historic urban landscape. And are they relevant, and have they given ideas for you in your historic city? And a key objective of this session is to discuss on-site practical implementation of Hull and how it is adapted in your own contexts. Next one, please. So thank you, and I look forward to our lively discussions. And I'm now going to hand over and get started with our case studies. And the first one, which I'm very excited to hear about, Hannah Fairbridge and Amanda Bacon will be presenting. You can see them now on the screen. And I'd like to hand over to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name's Amanda Bacon. I'm the Manager of Policy and Programs at Heritage Victoria. And my co-presenter is Hannah Fairbridge, who's a Policy Officer at Heritage Victoria. Before I commence our presentation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which we are presenting. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I'd also like to thank UNESCO for this wonderful opportunity for us to talk about the work that we've been doing around the World Heritage Management Plan for the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. Next slide, please. So the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens is a World Heritage listed site located within inner Melbourne, the capital city of the state of Victoria. The area known as Greater Melbourne, which includes the Central Business District and surrounding suburbs, has a population of, according to my notes, 4.96 million people currently. There's some additional statistics on the slide which give you an indication of Melbourne's projected population rise. With the population expected to more than double in the next 4 decades, Melbourne, and in particular its heritage buildings and open spaces, will face increased development pressures and urban encroachment. For this reason, it's essential that we as heritage practitioners have a strong understanding of the value of the heritage that heritage places hold for communities and the ways in which communities access, engage with and understand heritage places. Next slide, please. The Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens is a 26-hectare site on the northern edge of Melbourne CBD, and it provides a picturesque and grand entry point for commuters and visitors. The image on the next slide gives you an idea of the proximity of the site to Melbourne CBD, and also the prominence of the Grand Hall and its dome and the setting of its historic gardens. Australia has currently 20 sites on the World Heritage List, 12 of which are listed for their natural values, 4 for mixed cultural and natural values, and 4 are listed only for cultural values, including the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. The site is the only historic heritage site in Victoria on the World Heritage List. Our other site, Budj Bin, has been listed for its Aboriginal cultural heritage values. The World Heritage Site, this World Heritage Site is protected under legislation at both Commonwealth and state levels. At the state level, the Heritage Act 2017, which Heritage Victoria administers, provides for the regulatory framework for a site that is included both in the Victorian Heritage Register, which lists places and objects of state-level cultural heritage significance to Victoria, and on the World Heritage List. So in Victoria, the only site that currently meets both these criteria is the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens. Next slide, please. So this slide provides, no, I think if we jump a slide, perhaps, there should be a panoramic view of, yes, that's the slide. So this slide gives you a sense of the location of the site in relation to the Melbourne CBD. Next slide, please. So management of the Royal Exhibition Building Carlton Gardens is guided by a World Heritage Management Plan, which must be implemented and subsequently reviewed every 7 years in accordance with the Heritage Act. In 2020, review of the existing World Heritage Management Plan began and caused those responsible for its implementation and review to consider current and future site challenges. The World Heritage Site in its entirety is relatively small compared to some other World Heritage sites that encompass entire cities. But despite this, management of the site is quite complex. It spans 2 local government areas and is protected by local, state and national heritage laws. Additionally, the site is bounded by a buffer zone known as the World Heritage Environs Area, which is intended to protect the outstanding universal values of the site which it surrounds. The Environs Area is managed by a strategy plan, which is one of the 4 attachment documents to the World Heritage Management Plan, and it sets out strategies for the appropriate use and development of the Environs Area to ensure that the OUV of the World Heritage Site is protected and managed. The Environs Area is protected by both local and state planning laws, but in recent years, and with an increasing population and need for residential and office space, this has led to increasing development pressures within the Environs Area. These pressures have the potential to affect the setting of the World Heritage Site, which presently sits within a predominantly low-rise historic urban landscape of 19th and early 20th century buildings. The next part of the presentation will discuss one component of the World Heritage Management Plan review, being a community consultation process, which had the goal of identifying community expectations for the site into the future. This also included identifying opportunities to better manage development pressures in the Environs Area, as well as updating the strategy plan, and to better understand how people use, interact with and value the site. Next slide, please. The community consultation process has to date been an essential component of the review, and it ran for a period of 8 weeks. And I think we've jumped to the wrong slide again. I think we go back. Yes, perhaps next slide, sorry. Sorry, I think I've interrupted the flow of things. Yes, go to the next slide, please. Sorry about that. The community consultation process has to date been an essential component of the review. As I said, it ran for a period of 8 weeks last year. It took a very people-centred approach and encouraged anyone with an interest in the site to have their say on any aspect of the site, with the aim of gathering wide-ranging feedback to inform future management. At this point, I'll hand over to Hannah, who'll talk about the community consultation process itself.
Thanks, Amanda. So as Amanda previously mentioned, the consultation period ran for 8 weeks, and it unfortunately coincided with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in Melbourne. The city was locked down and restrictions on movement and public gatherings were imposed, meaning the project working group had to very quickly change our consultation approach. We had originally planned a 4-week consultation involving online and in-person activities, but we extended this out to 8 weeks and all planned activities were reconfigured to utilise only online engagement tools. The project working team used a Victorian government online platform known as Engage Victoria to gather community feedback. And you can see on the slide a screenshot of the Engage Victoria webpage, which we were able to build a variety of tools into the page for accessible and wide-reaching engagement, including the timeline here on the right, an overview, and then links to some of our other information gathering resources, which I'll discuss in more detail on the next slides. So if we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see an interactive map, which was one of the most popular tools used throughout the engagement. So you can see the environs area boundary on the map outlined in black, and then the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton Gardens site itself is covered by all the pins, but it is under there. So the map was designed to be easy to use, fun, and a fairly informal way for people to have their say. We asked participants to place a pin on the map, answering one of 3 questions. What do you love about the place? What do you think is important to protect at the place? And how do you imagine the place in the future? This proved to be the most popular tool used for people to have their say. We received 266 comments on the map. Lots of them were people sharing personal memories and stories of the site. And interestingly, because the consultation coincided with COVID-19, lots of people were commenting, saying how important the site was to them during this time to have a green open space, so nearby their businesses and houses. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see another of the major tools used throughout the consultation, which was a survey. So the survey was developed by the project working group, and it asked participants multiple choice and extended answer questions on a range of themes. And something really important throughout the development of the survey was to ensure that it used accessible language, and it didn't take too long to complete, so that we could get a wide range of community in Melbourne and Victoria completing the survey. Other engagement activities included a live online forum in which participants could have questions answered, use of accessible everyday language in all communication. The project working group also published 2 documents to assist in community understanding and to further encourage participation in consultation for a site which, as Amanda has mentioned, has traditionally and somewhat notoriously been described as overly complicated. So that was a really important factor to consider during development of this community consultation. And next slide, please. Due to the timing and the impact of the ongoing pandemic, it was difficult to predict how far-reaching and successful the consultation would be. There were concerns that community interest would be minimised due to the pandemic. But despite the challenges of consulting during a pandemic, at the end of the 8 weeks, 506 responses had been received and included very detailed, useful, and quite personal information about the site that people had shared. In addition to guiding the direction of the future management plan, the community consultation has already resulted in tangible actions that will eventually lead to improved site management and conservation and enhancement of all significant values at the site. Site management is complex and has a reputation among the community for being unclear. This was an issue that was identified in many responses and revealed to us that the community have a desire to fully understand and engage with site management. You can see some of the more tangible actions that have resulted from consultation on the slide, keeping in mind that all results received will inform the World Heritage Management Plan and will continue to inform site management into the future. Next slide, please. As I've mentioned a few times, the obvious challenge of consulting was the impact of the pandemic and the inability for any community consultation to go ahead in person. I think, though, if the project working group were to run the engagement process again without the challenge of a pandemic, it is highly likely that similar engagement methods could be utilised. Incorporating innovative online consultation methods allows for accessible, wide-reaching consultation that may result in more diverse responses and participants than a traditional in-person consultation process. And there is, of course, the ongoing challenge of ensuring the community remain empowered and have a sense of ownership of the site that is protected for its significance to the global community. Through ongoing discussion with the site steering committee, project working group, and consultants, we are confident that a robust and inclusive management plan will be developed and implemented into the future. Next slide, please. It was difficult to predict how the community would respond to the consultation given the global pandemic. However, the number and the content of the responses showed the project working group that despite the pandemic, the community remain invested in the World Heritage Site and feel a sense of ownership and pride towards it. The results showed us that community have a strong understanding of what World Heritage listing means and have a desire to see the site protected into the future. The consultation also revealed elements of the site that are yet to be understood, promoted, and protected in the World Heritage Management Plan, particularly those values that are important to community but are not recognised as the outstanding universal World Heritage values. The review has also resulted in ongoing consultation with traditional owners in the area the site is located to document, interpret, and protect values at the site that are important to Victoria's First Peoples. Furthermore, the consultation showed us that the community understand change as a necessity at World Heritage sites, but highlighted the places that reveal our collective identity and help us to feel part of an interconnected community will always be important despite the challenges, and management must balance the pressures of urban development with the needs of community. And if we go to the next slide, I'd just like to finish by pointing you all to the Engage Victoria website where you can see the documents mentioned. You can still have a look at some of the engagement tools, although that first phase of consultation has closed. And feel free to direct any queries to me. And I'd just like to end by thanking the team of the World Heritage Cities program for inviting Amanda and myself to speak this evening or morning. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amanda and Hannah. That was really terrific. We will now move straight ahead to my colleague, Xiao Yong. Good morning to you. Good evening. I'm not sure of your time frame.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, and lovely to see you again.
Yeah.
I will immediately hand over to you to hear the latest update on Pingyao Ancient City. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, good morning or good evening, everyone. So I'm very happy to share our recent efforts for the World Heritage City, Pingyao Ancient City. So maybe you will hear a lot of critics about Pingyao Ancient City, for example, overdeveloper, tourism, etc. But I think maybe it is very interesting to share with you about some efforts that we are trying to do or we have done in Pingyao recent years, and just want to try to make the balance between the heritage conservation and the local development. Yeah, at first I would like to introduce the basic information of Pingyao Ancient City. Just as mentioned in this plan, Pingyao is located in the center of the China, and the World Heritage City is about have the population about 20,000 and 2.43 square kilometers. And Pingyao is an example of a traditional Han Chinese city founded in the 14th century. Its urban fabric shows the evolution of architecture styles and town planning in imperial China over 5 centuries. Next, please. And we have found the plan of the 1960s, and maybe you can compare these two images that they well preserved the ancient city. And in 19 1986, Pingyao was listed as a national historical and cultural city in China, and in 1997, the ancient city of Pingyao, including Shuangling Temple and the Zhenguo Temple, was listed as World Cultural Heritage. Next, please. So the left column is OUV of Pingyao. I won't read it, and maybe you can find it on the website, etc. Today, I would like to emphasize the right columns, because according to our social survey, we have sent the questionnaires, etc., by WeChat, the new social media, in 2018. 2 years ago, and we have got many responses, about more than 500 responses, and it showed that not only the OUV, the outstanding universal value, but also the Pingyao Asian city has a very strong local value, the social and cultural value, and they are very important for the stakeholders, the heritage committee, and the heritage city in the dimension of the emotional connection, the identity, and their welfare. Next, please. Next, please. So it is very important to show that the dual attributes of Pingyao Asian city. It is not only a heritage city, but also a human habitat. So they are indivisible, which forms a living heritage. Next, please. So according to these dual characteristics of the Pingyao Asian city, so the conservation and revitalization program of Pingyao Asian city will have focused on three strategies and multiple actions aiming to improve the living condition of the community through heritage conservation, social and economic revitalization. And in 2014, the Master Conservation Plan was approved, and now it is still under implementation. But now we are evaluating this Master Conservation for the revision. So the main partners of this Master Conservation Plan are Shanghai Tongji Urban Planning and Design Institute and Tongji University, Pingyao County People Development, and Global Heritage Fund, and the UNESCO experts, for example, Elizabeth, have given us a lot of help and their great ideas about the guidelines and the management plans, and etc., etc. So I would like to thank you again. Yeah, next, please. Next, please. Yeah. According to the Master Conservation Plan of Pingyao, the objective of this plan aims to develop an urban area with integrated functions of culture, tourism, and habitat. So it should be a cultural Asian city, but also it should be a livable World Heritage city, World Heritage site. So under this context, the objectives are set to promote social and economic development while achieve the conservation and management involving communities and the residents. That is very important for this city. Next, please. So in this Master Conservation Plan, and we established three key strategies. One is conservation strategy, and the second is a livable strategy, and the third is a new industrial strategy to avoid the tourism-oriented industry development. Just want to develop other industry to improve the industrial resilience. Yeah. So the A comprehensive conservation framework has been established, including the urban texture, habitat control, traditional courtyard houses, and the intangible heritage and cultural space. So it is a very typical work that usually we will work for the Asian city. Next, please. But the second, I think, is very important because not only the traditional heritage is now well conserved, and also according to the social survey and oral history collections, and we found that many recent or modern recent heritage is very important for the local community. For example, the industrial heritage, you can find that in these pictures that the diesel engine factories, etc., have been abandoned for more than 20 years, 30 years, but they are also one part of the heritage belonging to the local community. And the local people, they worked for a long time in these factories, and they have many beautiful memories about these factories, etc. And also because the Asian city need the new space, the big space, public space for their infrastructure and public services. So we would like to reuse this abandoned space to new use. And the third is about the living condition of the local have been improved through the restoration and subside project. And we have established a public-private program and to encourage the local people restore their own traditional courtyards according to the guidelines. So till now, till 2018, there are more than around 100 traditional courtyards have been restored. Next, please. And here you can find the new cultural industry besides visiting tourism. For example, the creative industry and the exhibition industry, etc., and also the industry based on the intangible handicraft, etc., integrated them into these abandoned spaces, and reuse, for example, the old plant and to be as a fuel palace, and to make this abandoned place as an international festival space, and encourages the new young people and the artists and the local inhabitants, etc. They can work here, and also the children can play here. And at the same time, the revitalization of the local intangible cultural heritage is very important. For example, in these pictures, and you can find the economic recovery and the resilience of the traditional and intangible handicraft during the COVID-19, because they use the internet and to teach the people to learn cut paper and to learn how to make the clay, etc. So it is very, very interesting, a very interesting discovery during our evaluation after the COVID-19. And also this number is very interesting as a rapid development of the tourism income, and you can find the percentage of the ticket income is lower and lower. So it is a very, very interesting trend. Next, please. And many actions and policies aims to improve the living condition and the residents. A people-centered approach has been adopted in in the implementation. For stakeholders, we have established workshops and heritage-related education, have organized in diverse forms to encourage community participation. And also for the general public, the government and many institutes like Tongji University organized a series of lectures, workshops, and activities to help raise awareness of residents and the shop owners. Next, please. And the lessons we can find also many difficulties and problems in Pingyao. For example, the overall conservation situation is very complicated. The heritage site involves many sites, and the city still includes almost 20,000 residents living inside. A comprehensive conservation framework needs to protect the authenticity and the integrity of the city. It is a very big challenge, and how to manage the changes for this living heritage. And the second is the property is very complicated. Many of the heritage belongs to the private owners or a mixed ownership. Yeah. And to encourage the private owners to restore their traditional dwelling house, and the government published the guidelines and gave the subside policy. The third, Pingyao is a county level city. That means the lowest level city. And even though it is a World Heritage Site, so the capacity of management is quite behind, lacking information and a useful management system. To solve the problem, a toolbox combining planning, permission, mechanism, finance, and governance information was created together with a solid management plan. The fourth, most of the residents living in the city lacks of the understanding of the value of world heritage and the awareness of conservation. And so to encourage the community participation, heritage education has to insist on raising general awareness. So based on our work, for example, the community workshops, etc., and we found this the public awareness have been improved a lot. Next, please. So Pingyao has conducted conservation strategies, livable strategy, and a new industry strategy to balance, to try to balance culture, tourism, and habitat, which led the World Heritage City to sustainable development.
Excuse me, Xiao Yong, just a couple more minutes to try and keep the time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with the study of history and historical layers, traditional conservation of monuments has changed to a comprehensive and integrated conservation approach. Heritage are used as important resources following the HOL approach. So not only the top-down conservation, but also should establish the people-centered approach, and through public-private cooperation, traditional dwellings are conserved and revitalized, which furthers the protection of the built heritage. Yeah, next please. I think, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Oh, that was excellent. Thank you so much. The timing was perfect. I couldn't see how many more slides you have, but the timing was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. Gosh, what two very interesting but different case studies throwing up different questions. And I'm going to ask my colleagues to direct how the live audience can ask questions. So there's going to be a screen shared, and this will be explained to us, and then we'll moderate the questions. We've got some a good amount of time to have some interactive discussion, half an hour. So I invite you, please, to follow the instructions on how to ask questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I will just briefly intervene to ask Alba to help us through a very quick poll we want to do with everybody who is here, and then we can come back to question answers. it's an interactive poll. Alba, if you could please join us to do that.
Yes, hello everyone. Happy to see you. So our team has prepared an interactive poll. You can access it by connecting to this webpage you see here, slido.com, and introducing the name of the poll, HUL1. And you will find a set of 6 questions that we want to share to start warming up the discussion. And my colleague is going to share a screen so that we can see the questions and everybody's answers. So it's going to be like a very visual poll. So please, if you can start connecting to that web page to share your answers.
Can you put the link in the chat, Alba? Thank you.
Yes. So the web page is slido.com. Once you get there, there will be a box at the top asking you which poll you want to use. And for that, you use the keyword you have here, HUL1. Going to give you 1 minute so that all of you can access the poll. Let me know when you're ready. Elizabeth, are you ready?
Yes. This is
Yes.
Yes.
You accessed it?
Yeah.
You're seeing it? Okay.
Oh no, hang on. I've got the Slido green. Yes. And what are your main takeaways for the presentation and case studies?
Yes. So okay, let's start. The first question would be, what are your main takeaways from the presentations and case studies? You're free to give your answer. There will be displayed on the screen. So this is anonymous. You can comment whatever you feel like. So please go ahead.
Okay, and so just to familiarize myself, so people are typing in and we can all see their answers, but it's anonymous. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we can maybe give a quick overview of the answers, and maybe we can bring these back to the general discussion.
Okay, so we all just start typing, do we? Is that what we start doing now? Okay.
Maybe I can start reading out loud some of the answers. So the first one, these are moving quite quickly. So some people think that public involvement is key. Community involvement, this repeats. Community involvement again, involvement of community is real strategic. Oh, that's going to be a big, strong point. Some of the people in the audience are happy to see examples from different sites. Positive management of change in the urban environment. That's another key point. And
I like the public and green spaces even more valuable for local communities. I think we found that worldwide, didn't we?
Yes, I think that's been key to everyone during this time. Public involvement. Okay, so maybe let's jump to the next one, keeping these in mind. Next question.
Okay.
Would be, from your experience and today's presentations, what are the main challenges in the implementation of HUL in the Asia and the Pacific region? Fast pace of change.
Yes.
We only have one answer. Let's wait a bit.
Yes, I could certainly make a comment on that I think the recommendation is more widely known and used as a process in Europe and America than maybe in the Asia and Pacific, but it is growing, certainly an understanding of the usefulness and application of hull in Asia and Pacific is now growing.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the fast pace of change in these cities.
We're receiving more answers, increasing population. I think that's linked to the fast change, growing urban growth, overdevelopment, lack of experience in HUL, lack of governance. As you can see, repeating answers get bigger. So
Yeah.
increasing population is a big one.
And lack of expertise also, I think, is one that's I've experienced in my work in the region.
People's awareness, that one's growing as well.
Yeah.
Lack of expertise, yes.
Alba, maybe we could do just one more and move back to the discussion.
Okay. So we're going for the last one. From your experience in today's presentations, what are the main opportunities in the implementation of HUL in Asia and the Pacific? These are opportunities.
Oh, that's a good word, dynamism. Yes. Certainly in the Pingyao presentation, I saw a lot of discussions amongst people who lived there, and I was delighted to hear about the courtyard houses being upgraded for local populations. Sharing of expertise, which is very much part of these meetings that we're having, and the importance of local economy. Inclusivity of spaces, that's a good one too. More income, yes, needed.
Yes. So Liz, what do you think? Because we are running a tiny bit late.
Yes.
We could stop the interactive poll here and we can give way to the discussion.
I would be happy to do that. Do people ask questions through the chat for the discussion? Is that correct?
Yes. So for the next step, the open discussion, everyone is invited to either raise a hand in Zoom. You can do it by clicking reactions at the bottom of the screen and raising your hand. And our team will give way to the different interventions. For those who prefer not to speak up, there's the possibility to just type the question on the chat, and I will pass it to Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth, you will keep track of the raised hands. I see one already.
I can't see where I see the raised hands. I'm sorry. Whoever's got their hands raised, please. I can't see. Is it in the view? Where do I see who's raised their hand?
Under participants.
Okay. Is it Fen Jing who's raised his hand? Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
hello.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning. Good morning,
morning.
everyone, and
Yes.
also good afternoon.
Yes.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I read your book, Asia Conserved. So.
Oh, good.
Good. First about me, Dr. Fen Jin, Chief of Asia Pacific Unit of the World Health Center. The reason I'm speaking, I think both cases are quite sort of close to my heart. For particularly Pingyao, I was the national coordinator for World Heritage in China between 1990 to 97. Mm-hmm. And Pingyao was one of the nominations prepared. And Professor Xiao Yong is also a close friend from Tongji, so that's I have I think two comments.
Yes.
First part, I say a message in honor of Dr. Ron Lawrence. I think this is also something a point of information on some of the activities we organize together for the Asia Pacific region. For Ron, I think you all know, Ron Romain Ons was really a professional, brilliant professional in the field of urban heritage. He is the author and also drafter of the historical urban landscape recommendation adopted by UNESCO. And I think in particularly in the Asia Pacific region, when Ron was heading the WHAP, World Heritage Institute of Training and Research for the Asia Pacific region, WHAP, based in Shanghai, we launched quite a number of activities relating to Hul. Some of the pilot projects like Ballarat, you just mentioned for Australia. Also things in Varanasi, Hyderabad in India, Shanghai, Suzhou, and Tongji, and Dujiangyan in China, Rawalpindi in Pakistan, and Ballarat also, Kathmandu Valley also. I think the important thing also, we try to promote the whole approach in Central Asia, particularly for historical cities along the Silk Road, like the historical center of Bukhara and Samarkand. I think these got some sort of, the idea is really to promote the whole approach, try to address the issue of heritage, urban heritage conservation, which is really, I think I quote Joe's word, it's managing change, where managing the living urban heritage is meaningful, but equally challenging, as we can see from the two case presentations. You know, on the one hand, we need to, for both addressing the safeguarding of heritage values, but on the other hand, also improving the quality of life of people living.
Yes. Could I just interject, Fenjin? Thank you for your comments. Yeah. Do you have a specific question? Because we do have other questions on the chat, which we need to engage with. Is there a specific question in relation to either of the presentations?
No, I think it's just a comment. That's, I think, yeah, I think, yeah, okay. I stop here. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yes, we do have a question from Yasmin from Indonesia. Actually speaking from Rome. So good morning, good lunchtime, Yasmin. And she is questioning the people-centered approach and development of non-tourism orientation with the new industry strategy. And yes, I was very interested in that, Xiao Yong, interested me because it has almost become a common and mainstream approach to marry heritage, city, historical site, and the alike. So my question, her question, is how is this new industry approach, how is it going? How is it performing? And how are you going? Is tourism, is it still a core theme within this site? Xiao Yong, can you unmute yourself and answer that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, it is a very important question, I think, for Pingyang. At first, I would like to say that we cannot stop the tourism development now for Pingyang, because tourism is a very the main industry now, especially during the after the COVID-19. But what we can do is to encourage the new industry, now tourism-oriented industry. For example, we promote or how to say revitalizes the internet, the intangible cultural heritage of Pingyang, for example, the cat paper, etc. But not only for the tourism, but also the education or for the young people, and to teach the great public, not only the tourists in Pingyang, you know, thanks to the internet, and so they can teach the children and the people who are interested in the intangible heritages, etc. And so I think it is also a very a new approach for the local people, and also this is based on the intangible heritage. And another very interesting and very obviously successful new industry is about the exhibition and art, etc. For example, since 20 years ago, Pingyang has organized the international photograph festivals, etc. And since 2016, and Pingyang with many partners, they have started to organize international film festivals and to develop the film industry and related with creative industries, etc., etc. So now more and more young people, and they studied abroad or studied in other cities about the art and the design, etc. They went back to Pingyang and to support this new industry. So
sounds wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Now I have a question from Joe King. How do we unmute and bring Joe King in? Oh, there we go. Hello, Joe.
You let him unmute himself and turn his camera on. Hello to everyone, and thank you for this very interesting session. I guess my question is the following. Since I've actually been following HUL literally since the beginning, and actually even in the pre days, because this actually, of course, started with the Vienna Memorandum in 2005, 2004, I can't remember anymore. And actually, when we started talking about this all of those years ago, the main, I won't say preoccupation, but the main issue was how to meld contemporary architecture and essentially contemporary architectural design into what we then called the historic urban landscape. Now, the historic urban landscape has taken on a much larger area of interest, covering a lot of other things, all of it incredibly, incredibly important. My question to the two case studies, but actually more generally, is have we lost this aspect of how do we incorporate contemporary design into our historic cities? And is there a need for us to actually go back and restart that discussion? Again, not forgetting all of these other things that we're talking about, but I think in this region of the world, almost more than any other, because there is, that poll that we just did all together, people were talking about rapid urban design, rapid urban development and shifting populations and all of those sorts of things. So, the Asia region, more than any other, really is undergoing this really massive transformation and urbanization. So I'm wondering whether a focus on how does contemporary design fit into the historic urban landscape actually is something maybe we need to come back again and again, not focus only on that, but at least have that as one of the elements of our discussion. And I'll turn off my microphone and turn off my camera and listen to the answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. For those of you who know me, this is an absolute preoccupation of mine, and in fact has been supported by Think City in Malaysia with their publication of a book called Streetwise Design, which is about this issue about contemporary design in historic contexts. I think it's an ongoing issue. It's a reflection on the ground in cities, whether we are doing this well or not. And there's always this tension between the desire for stark architecture to put a place on the map with a stridently new and different development, egotistically in a streetscape, versus more quiet and gentle interventions which respect the character of the city. So I think these are very important issues that it never goes away. I was interested to see in Xiao Yong's adaptive reuse of the industrial building that clearly the interior was very contemporary, which I think is entirely appropriate. And then always it comes down to, well, who is the regulatory authority? Whose opinion, whose design review board does this decision-making process go through? And that's why it's so important. One of the challenges brought up was this thing about capacity building and skills within the Asia Pacific region in the general skills needed in the implementation of hull, but particularly on the implementation of good design. Could I ask, does Amanda or Hannah or Xiao Yong have anything quickly to say about this I think, very important topic that Joe has brought up?
Elizabeth, I'll say a couple of words, probably not as eloquently as you've just expressed, but it's an ongoing issue. It's something that we are grappling with at the moment with the development of the revised strategy plan for the Environs area of the Royal Exhibition Building, Carlton Gardens, as well as having a couple of particular cases at the moment where we've got new development proposed. In one case, and probably in both cases actually, good design, but possibly not in the right place. The designs aren't reflective of the context of the site, and the use of materiality is a big consideration for us. What we're trying to achieve is materiality that is more muted and respectful of the World Heritage Building, rather than materials which are drawing attention to themselves. So it is a real challenge, particularly for the Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens being on the perimeter or the edge of the Melbourne CBD. We've got increasing development pressure at the southern end of the site. And what we're trying to avoid is a sort of a wall of buildings that are interfering with the dominance of the World Heritage Building. But yes, it's striking the balance between good design, but also good design that is reflective and conscious of its setting.
Yeah. Anybody else have a comment on that? Xiao Yong, do you have any quick comment on new development in Pingyao?
Yeah, I think one is very important, the master conservation plan, and the planner, this plan should establish a very clear and strict guidelines or the regulations about the corridor, the vision corridor, and etc. And the second is very important. I think in the case of Pingyao, we respect the historic, very important historical urban landscape. Not only their traditional courtyards as a heritage, but also the buildings, the industrial buildings, etc. And they are also the memory, the one part of the history of the Pingyao. And so why we just want to reuse this and to avoid the pastiche, to avoid the fake, before they will think the Shimini is not harmony with the landscape of the traditional landscape, etc. And they just want to demolish the industry, the factories, etc., and to make the fake courtyard, etc. And now we just want to emphasize that this is we should respect also this part of the history of Pingyao. And now, not only respect it, also we should reuse it and revise it, revitalize it, and also we should integrate the new design, the contemporary design, to meet the contemporary need of today. Yeah, so I think it is quite important.
Yes, thank you for that comment. I do see that there's been a maturity, I think, in the Asia Pacific region, where previously reproduction designs were seen as appropriate. And I think that's now been moved away from. But one of the curses I see, for example, in Australia is an obsession with adding boxes onto buildings, and often black. I mean, what is it with contemporary architects at the moment building black buildings? Wherever in contemporary or historic context, it's one of the beefs that I have currently, because I think it's important that the interventions that we make are will last during time, rather than being faddish and fashionable of the time. which will inevitably, I think, as we've seen in the past, often then have a short lifespan and be removed because people in 10, 20 years' time think that they're not appropriate. I now see that Namila and Mohammed are in line to speak. Could you unmute and come in and ask your questions, please?
Who should start, Mohammed or Tamila?
Perhaps Tamila? Namila? Yes?
No, it was not me. Hi, everyone. It's Nilima.
Oh, Nilima. I beg your pardon.
She wrote her question in the chat also. So.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, I can otherwise just ask. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be participating in HUL. I'm excited particularly because this year I did a project where HUL was the point of departure for me, and in that I created a policy for traditional. We wanted to conserve traditional buildings and the settlement itself in Kathmandu, because after earthquake, lots of building has been damaged, and mostly people, by people I would say the National Reconstruction Authority, they were mostly focusing on heritage buildings, World Heritage structures. So mostly the residential buildings were neglected, and after 5 years, mostly not only 5, maybe after 6 years, now we don't have people living in the core city areas. This was the main problem. People were moving out of the city because people never thought that they themselves are very important in conservation and they are also the part of heritage. They never gave themselves that value. Now, after 5 years, we are trying to convince people to live in the core city area and conserve these buildings. So we came out with the policy and bylaws, and as also the architectural designs that you were talking beforehand, so that people could be convinced and we could give them incentive. We also provided them incentives so that people could design houses in the traditional style. So my major question right here, this was only the background. My main question is to the South. I saw in her presentation that in China, they made a policy and they gave subsidies. And I was wondering how much these kind of policies and subsidy does encourage people to come back and design traditional houses, because mostly traditional houses are not comfortable. People feel like that. So how successful was the policy and incentive mechanism? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting messages from the organisers that we sadly are running out of time. Do we have time to have that question answered from Xiao Yong? I think it was specifically for her for the incentives. Or
maybe we could just see what Mohammed has to say, and then maybe a 30-second response, and then move to the last speaker.
Okay. So
thank you very much. Mine will be very quickly. I just wanted to second the proposal. I mean, the idea from Jo King and yourself, Elizabeth.
Yes.
But we have to go back to this helping people to reintroduce new design in historical city. I'm talking with African perspective. I know we are discussing Asia here, but I think this is really issue of many areas, many continents where urbanization is taking place quickly. And I see Africa, we have the same kind of challenge. And sometimes in part of Africa, it's not only the design you have a challenge, but the material also you have challenge. If you are talking of Timbuktu today, how do they design it? But which material are they going to use? This is a challenge. So I think we with the whole, we have expanded the territory, but I think maybe we have to go back again to the center and see how we can do it. So I think that is something we have to ponder again.
Yes, thank you for that contribution. We also have a comment here from Patricia, which about the politicians are more interested in modernism for new high-rise instead of preservation. And in the Caribbean, many developers working with politicians are coming from the Asia Pacific. So in other words, this is this problem about not having design originating from the locality, but ideas being imported and implanted into other places. I think that's a problem. That's a problem too. So Also, it's very worthwhile saying Montira has said on the chat about the UNESCO Asia Pacific Awards. They're very useful online and hardback books, softback books, which I use a lot. They've got 3 volumes now, and I would urge you see on the chat the link to those publications. So thank you, Montira, for that. I think we now need to move on. Is that correct, Alba, there was something else that we needed now to do?
Yes, to invite our rapporteur.
Thank you, Jyoti. If we could now please invite our rapporteur, to try and wrap up and to summarise what are the interesting discussions that we've had. So thank you so much. We'll hand over to the rapporteur.
Very good morning, afternoon, good evening to everyone. And it's been a very fruitful session and very engaging. And as the rapporteur, I will just try to do my best to summarize it. The first technical session on implementation of the recommendation on the historic urban landscape in World Heritage Cities in Asia and the Pacific region began with the opening remarks by Mrs. Jyoti Hosakarhar, Deputy Director, World Heritage Center. She presented a brief overview of the Hull recommendation, its landscape approach, values to be addressed, built and natural heritage, tangible and intangible, universal and local, its tools, and its objective to achieve sustainable urban development. She also spoke about the current threats and challenges, climate change issues, and outlined the 6-point strategy for implementation of the Hull approach. She explained the World Heritage Cities and Hull recommendation activities with emphasis on innovative practices that need to be adopted for future sustainability. The session chair, Mrs. Elizabeth Wines, explained the implementation of Hull recommendation through examples of Ballard City and Goldfields in Australia, Penang in Malaysia. She outlined the common threats that came through the state of conservation reports for the 46 World Heritage Cities in the Asia-Pacific region. Her presentation emphasized the urgency of responding to the Sustainable Development Goals. Ms. Wines showcased the Yangon project as a best practice in response to issue of conservation and material techniques, and on lessons learned from the pandemic situation in terms of new modes of transport as seen in Budapest and Berlin. She then invited participants to comment after the presentation of case studies, specifically in context of their adaptation to various contexts in Asia-Pacific region. This session covered 2 urban World Heritage sites as case studies. The first one, Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens at Melbourne, Australia, presented by Hannah Fairchild and Amanda Bacon. And the second case study of the ancient city of Pingyao, China, presented by Xiao Yong. Both these case studies showcase human-centered strategies that integrate the goals of urban heritage conservation with those of social and economic development as outlined in the Hull recommendation. Both case studies demonstrate a localized implementation of Hull recommendation with a balanced use of the Hull tools for civic engagement, planning, regulatory systems, and financial incentives in order to arrive at a sustainable urban conservation model. The Royal Exhibition Building and Carlton Gardens at Melbourne, Australia is a 19th-20th century exhibition hall spread in 26 hectares and inscribed under Criteria 2 on the World Heritage List since 2004. It faces challenges of development pressures and buffer zone management. The case study is an excellent example of a people-centric approach developed through a very innovative online community consultation strategy in the pandemic times during lockdown. Its impact is evident in the successful engagement of the local community in conservation management through an easy communicative strategy using a web page, online surveys, interactive maps, and accessible everyday language, easy-to-use documents. This approach not only enabled the site managers and the project team to identify and understand the local values and citizens' associations, but it also allowed for increased community involvement in site management. It helped in reflecting on existing governance strategy, along with inclusion of citizens' aspirations in future planning. The second case study, ancient city of Pingyao, China, with a population of 20,000, is spread in an area of 2.34 square kilometer. It dates between 14th to 20th centuries, showing historic layers over 5 centuries, and is inscribed under criteria 2, 3, and 4 sorry, on the World Heritage List since 1997. The city has significant living heritage with courtyard houses and traditional mode of living. Its master conservation plan, prepared by an interdisciplinary team of experts and organizations, was approved in 2014, and the primary challenge was to improve the socio-economic condition of the people, along with reducing negative impact of tourism. By adopting 3 clear objectives of enhancing preservation, promoting cultural industry, and improving livability, the site managers could achieve the required outcome of maintaining the outstanding universal value of the site and improving socio-economic conditions of the citizens, with artists and craftspeople continuing to work online even through COVID-19 conditions. The implementation toolkit involved elements of community awareness, adaptive reuse of unused factories, brownfield conversion to cultural spaces, conservation and capacity building by encouraging restore your own house, regulatory guidelines and financial incentives through subsidies, and an improved environment with better infrastructure and pedestrianization. The application of this approach showed tangible improvement despite the complex historic fabric and the lack of awareness of the local population. Following the case studies, the participants were invited for reflections and an interactive poll discussion. Most participants agreed on the need for focusing on public involvement and community engagement as critical learnings from these case studies. Among the challenges, participants agreed on lack of awareness among people, lack of expertise, and fast pace of change as some key points. Opportunities were listed by the participants, covered aspects of dynamism, sharing expertise, importance of local economy, and inclusivity of local spaces, as well as more income. The Q&A session covered comments on applying HUL across Asian historic cities like Shanghai in China, Hyderabad in India, cities in Pakistan, Bukhara, and Samarkand. The questions related to addressing the continued challenge of tourism impact with focus on local industries, like in cities in like Pingyao. It could possibly be managed with more online access and creating new exhibition areas for local industries. There were also questions related to contemporary design and how do they fit in the historic context through the landscape approach. The chair affirmed this as an important question to be addressed. And as examples, she mentioned her own work on the street views and urban design in historic cities in Asia region. Example of contemporary interiors in the factory design in Pingyao and similar approach and urban design parameters taken in Melbourne were also mentioned. There were other questions related to subsidies and how do they work in the context in China and would they be applicable in other contexts, and also on the challenge of which material to use in the context of new contemporary urban design. There were the additional comments on politicians' personal perspective influencing urban design in some cases. The chair finally concluded with reference to the 3 publications that would be useful in the implementation of contemporary urban design in historic context. To conclude, this technical session brought forth key challenges facing historic cities in Asia-Pacific region and introduced new paradigms of achieving human-centered urban sustainability in the difficult times of pandemic. These provide potential replicable models that can be adapted in varied contexts in the region. Thank you. I hope that covers those things.
Oh, that was an excellent summary, and thank you so much. And I urge people to be aware that on the 24th of June, discussions will be continuing and it will be possible. Rapporteurs will be bringing the points discussed today on that meeting on the 24th to create a global debate, and all the audience can join that. And perhaps Jyoti, you'd like to conclude by yes, some more information. But thank you from the chair to everybody who's participated, the speakers and the audience. It's been a fantastic session.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very, very much, Elizabeth, and also Shikha, for that excellent summary, to all the participants, to the speakers. We have here a mural board that just quickly captures visually some of the key points that have come up so far. Maybe, Carlota, if you can zoom in a bit more. So we just want to leave it up for a minute to have a view, and we plan to bring all of this material to the 24th also. And so please feel free to continue to the next session with us. You have to enter in the password and come into the new link. So please make sure to register for the next session that will start now at 12 noon and continue with us today. We have another session again at 3:30, which also has a separate Zoom link. So please join us for these sessions, continue. And so please enter your comments in the chat. We can put it onto this board that we are creating. Carlota, did you want to say anything more about this board? Otherwise, we're going to end the meeting right now.
Good. I will just stay here until because we are transmitting on YouTube, so I will stay here for a few minutes. But I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So here is the board. If anybody has other points that you'd like to add, please continue to put them in the chat for the moment. I think we are still in the link, but otherwise we will be stopping very shortly. All right. Well, we really look forward to seeing you at the following sessions today, 21st, 23rd, and 24th. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And see you very soon in half hour, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Dai, forte.